elevated when I get to the penthouse. On top of the mountain, I feel like I'm Moses. In spiritual science, you know I'm devoted. I'm pulling your rank, you got the motive. I just want the money, I don't want the fame. It's you and that verse, so you know my name. You gotta be cool when you playing the game. But as time goes on. Welcome back to Mental Gymnastics. I am your host, Professor Zeus. This is where we analyze the news, talk about the different stuff that's going on in the world, and, you know, take one step at a time to becoming more righteous and more aware of our surroundings, right? So today, I found out just a little bit of stuff that I've been talking about on Instagram, but this came about a few days ago. I would have had the video out earlier, but my family and I we traveled. All right, so we're in Texas right now. So it seems that I've been saying this a lot. Africa is looking towards not using the dollar as much as they should or as much as they like to, right? So this information, right? I have an article I'm going to share with you guys. Africa is one step closer to dissing the US dollar for trade. You have the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which will function to facilitate nations to trade in local currency outside of Africa, leaving the US dollar to be used only for trade with the US in Africa. So basically, when you're in Africa, in order to trade, you actually have to purchase dollars in order to actually trade. So you can kind of think of how expensive that is. We have our own currency, but I have to use my currency to buy dollars in order to actually trade with those dollars. Who wins in that situation, right? So let me share this video with you guys real quick about the Kenyan president. What's his name again? Let me see. Yeah, Kenyan President William Samoei Ruto. He received a standing ovation this week when he announced this in Parliament. And let me just pull this video up. Okay, so here we have it. Just in, President of Kenya, William Ruto urges African nations to dump the US dollar for intercontinental trade.
Traders from Djibouti selling to Kenya or traders from Kenya selling to Djibouti have to look for US dollars. How is US dollars part of the trade between Djibouti and Kenya? Why?
Keep in mind, like a lot of these African countries, people paint it as so that, these African countries, they don't know what they're doing. It's best that you take our advice over here in the West, but Africa is able to produce their own scholars with their own visions of what they think is best for, the continent. So, what he's saying is pretty valid.
And we are saying that today, Afri-Exim Bank have given us a mechanism where traders in our continent can trade in their goods and services, and the Africa Exim Bank will settle payments in local currency.
Just to give you context on this Afri-Exim Bank, they need to think of a new way to call that because it doesn't really roll off the tongue. But basically, this Afri-Exim Bank, it runs through Egypt, right? So Egypt is where the central bank is located, and just like I told you guys that Pan-African payment settlement system is going to be run through that bank. So this is what, the president is talking about.
That is why Kenya champions the Pan-African payment and settlement system that is done by our own institution, the Afri-Exim Bank. Why, members? Why is it necessary for us to buy things from Djibouti and pay in dollars? Why? There's no reason. And we are not against the US dollar. We just want to trade much more freely. Let us pay in US dollars what we are buying from the US. But what we are buying from Djibouti, let's use local currency.
And that's valid, right? If we're buying things from the United, or if they're buying things from the United States, it makes sense to actually use the dollar to actually purchase these things. But if you're purchasing something from Djibouti, Kenya, why not use the local currency, right? It actually makes more sense economically because Africa has, different currencies and things that they use. Um, but you know, like the president said, he doesn't really feel like, oh, nothing's wrong with the dollar or anything, but why do I have to go out of my way to pay to use this dollar, right? I'm paying to actually use the dollar when we already have our own currencies over here, right? And this same central bank that's located in Egypt is shareholder owned as well as African owned, right? So that's a big plus. And funny enough, this same Afrexim Bank, they gotta come up with a new name because it's hard to pronounce. So it's heavily invested in by China. So I found this other article. Let me share this real quick. Yeah, it says Afrexim Bank says $850 million from Chinese financial institutions will boost support for African trade. And this was back in 2018. The $850 million in financing facilities being made available to the African Export Import Bank by two Chinese financial institutions will allow the African Trade Finance Bank to greatly expand its support to African businesses seeking to diversify and expand their trade activities. So we've known for a long time, right, that China has been heavily invested in Africa. And, a lot of people do make the statement, oh, Chinese they want to control everything. But I always say, people from China they really know how to conduct business. Business, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, right? Um, the West or the Western world, us over here in America, always make this gesture that, you have to be scared of Chinese people or China. They're gonna take over your country, they'll own you, but technically that's the same stuff that we do over here in the West. We go to other countries with that same mentality and still enact it to other countries, right? But people in Africa are waking up. They're like, yo, this dollar, a lot of the stuff you guys got going on in America, we don't necessarily align ourselves with that. So why are you trying to force our hand in order to use your currency? We're losing more by having to purchase the dollar in order to trade with the dollar, right? But you have China just put 850 mil in that bank in order for Africa to, do underhand, overhand business hand to hand. You know what I'm saying? But and the other thing, right? Us over here in America, we act like we don't understand that we benefiting from China making money too, right? Because everybody keeps talking about, oh, China this, China that, Russia this, Russia that, but the three of us, China, Russia, America, we all are helping each other, whether you like it or not. China needs us. We need China to produce plastic, clothes, goods, and stuff like that for us. They need us to purchase that stuff for them, from them. Russia. Russia provides oil. They need us as a customer. We need them because we need oil. So all this chat, 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 chat stuff that you're seeing in the news, like we really need each other. So it's a lot of cat going on, right? But we just want to make it seem like, oh, this person, no, like we really need each other, right? And there was some other stuff I wanted to talk about. Yeah, so going back to, the West, speaking on whether or not Africa is mindful enough or even understands about what they're doing when it comes to dealing with China. You don't think Africa knows what they're doing, right? You don't think Africa understands what China's doing, but they need some some wiggle room. They need some sort of assistance in order to get them to that level. You feel me? I'll give you a plain example of how China helped out Africa. So, the Democratic Republic of Congo, they had some serious, like, messed up infrastructure after the Rwanda Ugandan army in 1997 came through and, like, messed everything up. But China actually repaired a lot of the infrastructure in 2010. There's this book called, let me see, called Cobalt Red by Siddhartha Kara, where it talks about how the blood of the Congo powers our lives. I just wanted to read a quick excerpt from it because I think Siddhartha makes a valid argument about, the current state of Africa and, this situation that we're seeing right now. Yeah. Yeah, so the foundation for China's dominance in Africa was established in 2000 when President Jiang Zemin proposed the creation of the Forum on China-African Cooperation to facilitate Chinese investments in African countries. The relationship was billed as a win-win. The Chinese would build much-needed roads, dams, airports, bridges, mobile networks, and power plants across Africa, and in exchange, China would secure access to vital resources to support its growing economy. In 2006, President Hu Jintao deepened the economic ties with the Sino-African Summit in Beijing that was attended by 48 African heads of state. A deal was struck between the Sao Mines and Joseph Kabila, in which Sao Mines agreed to provide 6 billion toward construction of roads and 3 billion toward upgrading mining infrastructure in Katanga. The money was to be repaid through the value of copper cobalt deposits excavated by Seco Mines. If the deposits proved insufficient, the DRC agreed to repay the loans through other means, right? So what are we saying, right? We have certain situations where people are willing to actually invest within Africa, but not to say that they're not going to get anything back from it, but like I said, it's business. You have to understand what's really going on. Now, going back to what the Kenyan president was talking about how they don't want to use the dollar anymore, I actually found out that more than 20 African nations are attending the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum in Russia. So there's a huge economic forum going on in Russia right now where 20 African nations have already agreed to attend in order to discuss different things about their own financial future, right? And it's being held in Russia. You guys have to understand what's really happening when it comes to money, these other countries, how they're looking at us as Americans living in America. It's not looking that great, because I'm like from Nigeria, right? And not too long ago, they just took out all the old money. They told everybody, return your old money and we will provide new money. In that little short window, and I still think it's going on, in that short window, you've seen that we're actually becoming more and more cashless, right? We're moving, so we have African nations not choosing to use the dollar, right? We have other nations moving to less and less physical cash, more cashless. We understand that next month the federal government is going to create the Fed now, which the with the central bank digital coin. So my question is, what's really happening? If you don't understand what's going on with the socioeconomic constru socioeconomic infrastructure of the world, you're messed up because you don't really see what's going on. If you don't understand the financial infrastructure of the world right now, what's going on, you're going to be in a bad place. So really try to understand that there's a lot of things in the works right now when it comes to money and how it's going to affect you and myself, right? Now, going back to Africa, going back to the West and how they say that, the West says, oh, Africans don't know what they're doing when they're dealing with China. But it's still Americans, it's still the West who comes into Africa to exploit, right? The first prime minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Patrice Lumumba, he was actually killed, right? He was killed because what was it? From like July to September of 1960, like Belgium had tried to like, mosey on into the Congo and stuff like that. And Lumumba was like, nah, man, like, nah, we not really moving with this. So what y'all got going on? Who do you think was the one, or how do you think he was assassinated? A lot of these different interests all fall back into America. So if it falls into America's interest, they're gonna do what they can to make sure that interest is seen and achieved. So who knows? All right, the CIA, they've made some documents known about how they try to, kill him with snake venom or snake poison in his toothpaste and stuff like that. But I'm just saying it's crazy. Like us in like America is telling African countries don't mess with China because you don't know what they got going on, but would still be the ones to go into Africa and take out their leaders. So who's, you know what I'm saying? Who's really doing what, right? And I had another video I wanted to show with y'all real quick. Let me see. We have what's her name? Uh, yeah. Let me share my screen real quick. So you guys listen to this and tell me what you honestly think.
I think we've always had significant attention on Africa by the West, Russia, and China, but for different reasons. Africa is a hub for natural resources. It has always been for the West. And now Africa has multiple options. Africa doesn't have to succumb to a bad deal that we get from the Western countries. Africa has choice now.
Africa has choice. They're understanding like we don't have to take a bad deal if it's not in our best interest. America is going to do what they're going to do for their best interest. So why wouldn't you think that the Africans are going to do the same? You feel me?
Africa now wants to be treated as equals at the table. And now Russia and China offer that to Africa. Africa and China and Russia have had a long history of friendship. And now we are able to cooperate as equal partners at the table.
How do you think that the war in Ukraine has affected the situation?
Yeah, so America would say, oh, because, we're dealing with, America is saying, oh, Africans dealing with Russia and China, like they don't know. But just like the woman said, there's been long-lasting relationships there. And, you know, they're just Africa is just keeping in mind what is in their best interest, right? So keep in mind also, Egypt just put in their application to join BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This organization has already said that they're trying to move differently, right? They're trying to move differently. So I really want to ask you guys, right? How do you guys see the future of, finance, right? You have more and more countries choosing to leave the US dollar alone. You have more and more countries siding with, you know, China, Russia, and less hope for America. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? We'll see, but just keep in mind what is actually going on, right? So drop some comments down and let me know what you think. Do you think that it's valid for the African countries like Kenya to, move away from the dollar? Do you think that makes sense to trade in their local currencies, or do you think that, no, we still needs to be backed by the dollar, whatever, whatever? And do you also think that China, Russia, even though, you know, they're looking out for their best interests, do you still think that, they are still at some level helping Africa? Let me know what you think. If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. It helps the YouTube algorithm. Head over to youandiverse.co to grab some merch. We still got 720 degrees of ascension. We got the ebook and the paper book online. And yeah, it's You and I Verse for a reason. We gonna get to that place that we're trying to get to, but it's gonna take some time. All right, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Elevated when I get to the penthouse. On top and on my own, I feel like I'm Moses. In spiritual science, you know I'm devoted. I'm pulling your rank, you got the motive. I just want the money, I don't want the fame. It's you and I verse, so you know my name. You gotta be cool when you playing the game.